What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Joe.
Joe, it's been almost like 30-some-odd years since the Cup Series has been at Nashville, but we're here, Ally 400. Pretty, quite a bit of build-up to this race, I'd say, so far. What do you think? What's your early thoughts on Nashville?
It's early. We don't know a lot. A lot of people are asking a lot of questions, and there's a lot of unknowns, but we've got to witness practice so far, and we know a little bit more. We know Hendrick's fast. We already knew that.
Surprise, surprise.
We already knew that, but there's a lot to still unfold, but we'll talk about what we know and kind of move on from there.
Yeah, it's been a real hectic time overall, I'd say, for the NASCAR community, the content providers. I can't even imagine what it's been like, going from like COTA, then back to Charlotte, then back out to the West Coast, and then back to Texas. Now we're at they are logging some miles, and with all this extra practice, it's really not giving us a ton of time to give out the quality, detailed content that we would prefer to put out.
But we'll still have information available. We're planning on putting out our race guide. It might be a little bit abbreviated because we'll be compacting everything in after we witness qualifying tomorrow. So check out the download link below in our descriptions. We'll make sure to include that once it's available. But it's going to be interesting to see how things kind of play out, all the unknowns. It's going to be fun. There's a lot of action on this concrete track. We already saw the trucks last night, Xfinity getting underway. There's going to be some unanswered questions when it comes to tire wear and how the track adjusts to that. It's going to be fun.
So it's been like 10 years since they've even been at this track. I think Xfinity was the last ones, maybe truck. So we've already seen the truck race. The Xfinity race is actually going on probably right about now. So we don't have any information there. But you watched the truck race last night, as did I. It was a pretty decent race, but there was some passing, but I feel like if we see a lot of the same stuff from Cup, a lot of single file runs, tire wear is not going to fall off a tremendous amount. So I don't think having a crazy pit strategy is going to make or break this race. Do you think we're going to see something similar to the way the trucks run? I mean, not a lot of passing, but the guys who are fast, like Todd Gilliland, what's the other guy? John Hunter Nemechek. They started in the back, but they came up front.
They did, but it took them a while. I think track position's going to play a role, so we get to watch qualifying and really get to see potentially who has speed. And if they don't have speed and just run a bad lap, we could see some guys that ran fast today have a bad lap and start in the back, and we know that they have good speed and will have to make their way forward. There's potential there. So there's still some stuff, obviously, that we'll have to watch and kind of already looking at information we have available. There's some guys that stood out. Hendrick guys, obviously. That's no surprise. You were at the All-Star race where Kyle Larson won. We'll get into that a little bit later, go over your experience. I think that's something that we need to discuss. There's a lot of hot topics in NASCAR and fan relations and things like that going on right now.
A lot of things were discussed on Twitter with the aftermath of the All-Star race. So, yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. I was listening on the scanners to the trucks during the truck race a little bit, flipping around back and forth. There was a lot of people complaining about the handling of the car, pretty loose, or trucks, sorry. A lot of them were fighting loose conditions. It seemed like a lot of the drivers were not super positive on the racing surface and the way the race was going. Obviously, some liked it more than others. But I do remember at one point towards the end of the race, I landed up on Haley Deegan's scanner, and she was not a fan of this race at all. So she's not hoping that they come back here for another 10 years. So it'll be really interesting what kind of radio comes out of the Cup Series race. Guys who like Ryan Preece, he won the truck race. He's going to have, I think, a nice advantage. Kyle Busch is racing in the Xfinity race today. I think they're going to have a nice leg up on some of these other guys who if they have raced here, it's been so long they have no advantage.
Well, don't forget Ross Chastain was in that race that night. William Byron as well. Byron unfortunately blew a motor and wasn't able to finish, but those are key elements that
he was running well when it happened.
He ran well throughout, and there are guys that have experience from the Busch years. Whenever it was the Busch Series back in the 2000s, I remember, and it's gone through a lot. If you've been on Twitter or any of the NASCAR social medias, you go back and can watch the 2004 Busch Series race that had the exciting finish. And I remember it very distinctly growing up and watching Kyle Busch in that 5 car get spun out and take out a couple other good cars, Robbie Gordon, and it was a fun time. Michael Waltrip came up for a win. That was something cool to see as well. There's just so many things that are still unknown since that time was so far back. We've gone through new cars. There's a lot to talk about in that as well, because we're in a 750 horsepower package this week, going that it's 1.33 mile, I believe, track.
All
so
right.
There's a lot to talk about in the setup and a lot of unknowns.
Well, one of the things that's already surprised me is where some of these guys have landed on their practice times. You mentioned it's 750, so if we start diving into the data, there's some guys who currently are not high on the practice charts, but overall are really high up on the 750s for the season. 2 guys in particular, Joey Logano and Martin Truex. Joey Logano overall, he's ranked 20th and Truex is 22nd. Are we going to see these guys? Obviously a big part when it comes to building lineups is going to be qualifying. So we will be watching that very, very, very closely and see what we can get. But is this going to be a little bit of a concern, or is it right now we see the Hendrick guys up top? Is there going to be anyone there to kind of contend with them when the guys who's been the best all season are putting up these kind of numbers?
It's going to be interesting for sure, because you mentioned how far back the average lap time was for those two, Logano and Truex. You look at the 750 horsepower data throughout the season at this point, Truex is second and Logano's third. If you look at the driver rating, and Truex has 3 wins and Joey Logano has a win.
But 7 top 5s in that package out of 9 races.
Exactly. So there's a lot of performance there, and we see Joey Logano priced very cheaply this week. I'm sure if he has one fast lap and can put together a top 10 starting position, he's still going to be able to put a good performance together and be worth it. I would imagine in any environment, having exposure to him is going to be really key. But
especially if he's starting behind 15th, I think at that point you have to lock him in.
And then Truex, though, he is something. He's a driver that concerns me, because lately he's not been performing well, and it's only the 3 wins were at tracks that we have in the playoffs. And those seem to be focuses for that team. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be interesting to see if they put any focus on a track that who knows what the future holds. It's not in a key situation right now. They could go all in to try to win, but they might just, like we've seen in practice, not really dial things in and provide us with a performance of, I don't know. We don't know.
Man, I'm wondering if we're going to see different teams really attacking this race to try to go after the stage points, and then those just trying to go after the win. And, of course, that's assuming that a Larson or even a Byron or an Elliott doesn't just run away with this one. Since we don't have any history with stages and this racetrack, we don't really know how these teams are going to be doing pit strategy. We haven't seen when the pit window is going to be and when these guys are going to, if they're going to be able to stretch it. There's a lot of things that we still don't know. I think before the race we'll have enough information to kind of figure that out. But I think this could be one of those races. So after the All-Star race, there's only 10 races left in the regular season. And I would imagine a guy like Denny Hamlin, who hasn't won yet, I know they're going to be trying to get aggressive and get a win, get some more of those playoff points. But that's what they need. They need to secure that top spot. And the only way they can do that is with high finishes and getting extra points. They don't have to always win the stage, but they need to finish top 3 to try to lock that in. Because if you get the regular season championship, that's 15 bonus points. That's going to go a long way, because here lately it's been Larson gobbling up all these points. Okay, let's just say he gets there. It's going to be a tight race between all these other drivers to advance each and every round. So the more playoff points you can secure, and right now Denny Hamlin's best shot is to get that regular season championship, you got to think that they're going to be trying something different to get the most points out of each and every race, because right now that seems to be the hand that they're dealt.
Yeah, and if they're doing that, then that means they're going to try to be within that top 10 and that top 5 all day. And if he has a qualifying performance where he practiced today, 11th overall in the average 5 fastest times there, I think we're looking at potentially opportunity for place differential if he gets out and they tune it up where he's fairly fast, since he is the number 1 driver with the performance in the 750 horsepower package. We could see some place differential. Barely. But he is, and he's been consistent. So we need to take that into consideration and look at where he qualifies. Even if he's on the front, he could be in a position to really have some opportunities to pay dividends, because he's going to be cheaper than Kyle Larson. Everybody's going to be on Kyle Larson because Kyle Larson's been there's no reason not to have Kyle Larson pretty much at this point.
And the thing that I'm seeing here that is, to me, encouraging for Denny Hamlin and that team is they were 8th best in practice. So whatever they're trying to do, they got their own strategy, what they're out there running, but hey, they're at least top 10 right now. So for us looking at building our lineups, if they can qualify 8th, or maybe even back a little bit, maybe he slips up a little bit going in the corner or something. Seems like he can have a car that they should be able to improve upon that, given the stats that they have. He should be a top 5 car at the end of the day if he can keep it clean. So I think really looking at where Hamlin qualifies tomorrow early, I got to say he's one of my, I think, favorite plays this week, given that he's only the 4th most expensive driver. If we can get him at, like I said, an 8th or slightly below, I think there's some PD upside, and I think a strong chance to maybe get out front and dominate. But that is a little risky because we haven't seen it the last few weeks, but that's because of Larson.
It's going to be interesting. We know Larson's going to try to be in a position to dominate it once again. I guarantee you they're going to come out fast, trimmed out, ready to put up a fast lap. It looked like Hendrick in practice had that strategy. But we haven't talked about William Byron. He was able to race the truck race, get a little bit of laps and stuff under his belt. He had the fastest overall 5-lap average and looked good.
Actually, Larson did end up beating him out.
Did he?
Yeah.
So,
but he's right there. They're both right there.
Both of those guys are right there. It's going to be so interesting to see who establishes himself early, who has the strategy, because William Byron and his crew chief ran it together in the truck series. They might have learned something to take it a little bit back to Team Hendrick, or do they keep it to themselves? There's a lot to look at as we unfold here, because this really is a wild card.
Yeah, I think what you may have been thinking of was he had the fastest qualifying time run on practice.
Gotcha.
They were basically tied, but they gave the slight edge to Byron. So he might end up qualifying first, Larson second. Maybe that's enough where he can get the preferred line and stay in front, and he's got a fast enough car where he should be able to stay in front of Larson. Byron looks strong. I think, to me, there's 2 real big surprises in the overall practice in the top 10, really the top 5. The first is Ross Chastain, 3rd best overall. He was in the truck race. He didn't have a particularly great truck race. I think something happened late. It was never really much of a contender, but that's still some laps under your belt. That's an advantage over some of these other guys. A team that's been running really strong came out, kind of surprised some people, and won that first stage in the All-Star race to lock himself into the main event. That 42 team, they're really starting to click it along right now. We know how aggressive Chastain is, and that bites him. I think it did end up hurting him some in the All-Star race. But that's impressive to come out after practice and be third best overall. And the only two guys you're behind are two Hendrick guys.
Yeah, no, it's surprising that team seems to be dialing things in, and it's right at the right time. It's going to be interesting to see if that is just pure luck that they came off the trailer like that, or if that's something that they'll be able to maintain throughout the race. Because in the 750 horsepower package, he's been about 18 and a half is his finishing position, so top 20, which is pretty solid. But if he has a high or fast qualifying lap and doesn't I guess really maintain a good finish, it's going to be hard for him to reach value. But we'll see where he qualifies. He looked fast. They've been fast to see if they're able to maintain it. But some of the 750 horsepower data that we've got just it keeps me a little bit hesitant.
Oh, for sure. One guy that it's good to see kind of show some speed. I know you've been a big fan of him recently, but I certainly have been more hesitant on is Ryan Blaney. Fourth best overall. He's been pretty solid in the 750 horsepower package. He ranks out 7th best according to driver rating. Not his, he's not wowing you. He has 0 top 5s, but he does have 4 top 10s in those 9 races. Maybe this is kind of where we can see Blaney kind of show up and flex a little bit on some people. What do you think?
I think he needs to. I think this is a point where after the All-Star break, we were looking for big things for him to kind of maybe get on track as we approach the playoffs, because I think he's learned a lot this season and really is in a position with this race being, like we've talked about, a wild card race. He seems to be one that can take advantage of a track like this, and Team Penske as a whole, I think some are really might be undervalued and overlooked this week. So I think he plays really well into some strategy based on where he obviously qualifies. We'll have to look, but I think based on his price tag and stuff, it really looks promising.
So the next guy I wanted to bring up, big shocker. He doesn't have any data past 5 laps. He didn't make a 10-lap run. So we don't quite know what we're going to get. But the 5th fastest guy is Ryan Newman. He is terrible on the 750 data charts. I think he ranks 27th in driver rating. Way down there. If he doesn't have a good qualifying run tomorrow, and we can get him with some nice PD, what are you interested in playing Ryan Newman after seeing those kind of numbers? Do you think it's going to be too risky? I mean, I was very surprised to see Ryan Newman 5th fastest.
I really wasn't, because to me, this kind of feels like a Dover Darlington racetrack, and he's been strong at Dover, especially early in his career. He had 3 wins there, and he's a banger. He's going to be in the mix, and I think watching the truck race, I saw a little bit more track position play into the results than I anticipated, even though we saw a lot of guys come through. It took them a while to get through, and there was strategy involved for Gillen to get to the front. So there are things and teams that might take a little bit more risk to win, and with that combination between driver and risk, I think we might see a nice balance of that with Ryan Newman. He's got some strong history of tracks like this to maybe make it stick on the concrete.
Well, they certainly need a couple strong finishes if they're going to make a playoff push. Obviously, they're on the outside looking in. Probably would need a win. But with a few wrecks, like you kind of mentioned in that Xfinity race from many years ago, with Waltrip getting that win, it's certainly, if he can position himself, I don't see that happening, but a good strong run. I mean, the big thing's going to come down, in my opinion, is just going to be qualifying and can you trust them?
Yep.
Because the 750 data does not back up trusting him at all, but you can't always trust past performance.
It's going to be interesting. There's so many unknowns with this track. There's so many unknowns that we're taking a lot of different data points to be able to kind of try to put it together a sort of a picture.
So the third Hendrick driver on the overall practice board might surprise some people, probably won't surprise others, but it's not Chase Elliott. It's actually Alex Bowman. At first few runs early in the practice, he was, I think, as low as like 18th, something like that. But they really started clicking off some laps, obviously. He's been pretty strong in 750 horsepower tracks. He has 2 wins already on tracks similar to this. Is Bowman going to be that guy that we're going to have to kind of lock in our lineups this week? Do we trust him that much yet, or are you surprised by this practice run?
What I'm surprised about is we haven't talked about Chase Elliott. That's the big surprising thing. He's 4th, but we'll get to that just here in a second. The thing I'm really thinking is Alex Bowman is probably going to qualify really well. His price tag is not too bad. He's going to be fast. We know based on the data, you mentioned those 2 wins, 7 top 20s and 5 top 10s in that time. 9 races has been what they've ran in this package. So he's been consistent. 5 out of 9 top 10s. That's pretty strong. It's going to be very difficult for him to reach value if he's qualifying in the top 5 and not finishing in the top 5. We'll need some laps led and stuff, but still, he's in a position, I think, to potentially pay off. We'll just have to obviously see how it plays out with qualifying.
So when you said Chase is 4th, are you mentioning the
Hendrick stable?
Oh, he's 4th overall.
4th in the Hendrick stable that we've talked about. We've already talked about Byron, Larson, and now Bowman. We haven't talked about Chase Elliott at all. That's the surprising thing. He's the former champion.
Yep.
And yet, we're not really even mentioned.
He's 9th fastest overall.
And that's something where we know this race is, we've said it many times, it's a wild card. So how much time and effort are they giving into this? Obviously, they're in the playoff mix. So this is something to look at, because he does have really good speed when it comes to 750 horsepower. He's been pretty consistent there.
Well, and he's been behind Larson. I'd say he's been the best driver the last 3, 4, 5 races. You can say, well, some of that's skewed here or there, but I'd say overall, I mean, finished 2nd at Sonoma, looked strong there. Obviously, Larson looked better. And same at the Coke 600. He had some laps led. Larson was better. And then at the All-Star race, he finished 3rd. Led some laps, looked good. Texas was in a great track for him, but still was up front. So I would imagine, they'll get this dialed in. They probably are looking at a slightly different strategy, trying to do something different from Larson, because you can't beat them at their own game. So I would imagine they got a few tricks up their sleeves. But at a track like Nashville, again, you have to factor in, well, how much are these teams really emphasizing this race in particular? I think it just comes down to, what is your strategy? What is your strategy for the remainder of the season? Do you feel like you have a chance to win the regular season championship? And what is your strategy going into the playoffs? Yeah, I don't think the 9 team is going to be honing in, like having this one circled as some of these other teams do, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're, top 5, top 3 at the end of the day.
It wouldn't be surprising, but I also would imagine that they've got next week Road America, a road course circled, where they can have a strong advantage there. But he's a former champion. He knows how to drive the race car and get every ounce out of it. I think he's somebody that, based on qualifying, that price tag he's got might, if he's going to probably qualify really well. So it's going to be very interesting to find that right mix. I think there's some other guys that will have better paths to value, and that's something we'll be able to provide in our race day, our race guide with our impact scores this week. We'll make sure to really emphasize, hey, we witnessed qualifying, we'll be able to understand a little bit more about how much of an impact these drivers will have on the race.
Yeah, unfortunately, we won't have the time to be able to provide the normal race day rundown video, which we enjoy doing, but there's just logistically with YouTube and just what we have at our disposal is just we can't get out a quality video in time. So you're definitely going to check out the race guide because we're going to update that as fast as we can once qualifying comes out, going through, giving our impact scores. That's going to be the best way to really get prepped once qualifying happens. One of the last guys I kind of want to talk about, as just at least to round out the top 10 in practice overall, is Tyler Reddick. I've seen a lot of guys kind of talking about him at this track. He's going to be running or is running the Xfinity race today, so it'll be interesting to see how he does in this particular one. But a team that's been good but not great, but the fact that we're almost halfway into the season and we're kind of consistently seeing him around this 8th to 13th position on the grid, whether it's starting or finishing, it seems to be there, which, I mean, he's ahead of a lot of good drivers, especially when we look at the practice board. I mean, he's ahead of Harvick, he's ahead of Brad, he's ahead of Kyle Busch. We've already talked about Logano and Truex. Do you have a hunch, a feeling like this could be a good Reddick race? I mean, this isn't going to be a rim riding race. That's his strength. What are we getting out of Reddick this week?
Well, when we dove into the data, we got the garage thoughts put together. You do an excellent job of every week, and that's part of our Patreon, by the way. So if you are interested in seeing some really thought out and put together data Jeremy and I spend time looking at every week, we offer that on our Patreon. That link is below in the description. But when I was looking at that, Jeremy, the thing that stuck out to me is we've been talking how consistent Austin Dillon's been performing and how I guess we're feeling more comfortable and confident in placing him in our lineups. Well, Tyler Reddick in the 750 horsepower has been pretty much the same average finishing position as his teammate Austin Dillon, which is, to me, an eye-opener. It's like, wow, that's pretty strong. But the thing that opened my eyes was he's got 4 top 10s compared to Austin Dillon's 1 top 10 in this package.
That's a great point.
That is something that he's been able to get a little bit more performance out of this package than his teammate, who's been more consistent, but he's been more consistent in this package than his teammate. So I think this really might be a difference maker in our lineups this week. He might be able to be consistent, but he might be somebody that a lot of people are looking at as well.
And he seems like he's the kind of driver that likes loose handling cars, really has to maintain control of the whole race. And I think that after the first lap, 2 laps, again, there's not a lot of tire fall off, but there's just not a lot of grip. And as this race goes on, progresses throughout, you get more and more rubber laid down. That's just going to make it more and more slick. It's a concrete surface. And if it ends up being hot and the sun's out on it most of the day, these guys are going to have their hands full. And I think that does lend itself to guys like Tyler Reddick, who I think can really wheel it. The problem is they're going to be pushing it so hard because they can. It's so easy to go over the edge. To me, I think Reddick, depending on where he qualifies, I think he can be a great play. It's definitely going to be a little risky. If we can get him starting further back, then I think it'd be a pretty good lock. But at the rate he's going, I could see a top 10 starting position, which is a little you can't be super confident in that.
It's a little dicey.
Yeah, to put it nicely. Anyone else you wanted to kind of talk about that maybe stuck out to you with the practice that you saw? I mean, that they were moving around. There were several times where Matty D was posted, top 3 of the leaderboard, which was nice. Overall, he finished 13th. Anyone that you really saw that you're like, okay, that's something we need to note?
I don't know if it's something that I witnessed per se today, but it's something I've kind of seen overall. Is this is the time of the year I think Kevin Harvick starts to come into the mix. And I heard Rodney Childers is going to have his car off the hauler the way he wants it this week. He ran, I think, top 12 or so in practice. He's got a special Father's Day paint scheme that Keelan was able to unveil with the Gravedigger monster trucks paint scheme.
Sweet paint scheme.
So,
I have to have that diecast. That is a sweet looking car.
It looks so cool, and with Father's Day, it's going to be cool to have that mixed into the whole thing. So I think this could be a week that Kevin Harvick could potentially fly under the radar, could potentially, based on if he's him and Rodney Childers are clicking, this could be the week. I just want to see where they qualify, and we'll find out what where he lands on the impact score once we witness that. How about you?
Well, I mean, to kind of talk about Harvick real quick, 11th best driver according to driver rating in the 750 package, but he does have 5 top 10s out of 9 races. So they've been off. We've documented this basically every week, but they haven't been terrible like some of their teammates. To me, one of the most encouraging things for Harvick is not the fact that Harvick was 11th fastest. It's the fact that Amarola, who did get a lot of laps in, overall ranks out the 12th best. That team needs it. But the point, to kind of circle it back to Harvick, is he's had such a huge gap between his performance and his teammates' performance almost every race this year. The fact that we're at least seeing one of his teammates right behind him, although the numbers aren't where you would like to see or what that number 4 team wants to see, at least it's like, okay, we're seeing a little bit more out of the team as a whole. Maybe we can dial this in. We can get some speed. And maybe you just finally get a little lucky. Sometimes you got to have that happen in these races.
Yeah, and we even saw Chase Briscoe lay down the 11th fastest lap. So they do seem to have a little bit more speed. They might have had a little internal discussions, and this is what the result is. This could be the week we start to see Stewart-Haas have a little bit more speed and things start to click. We expected a lot of Kevin Harvick. We talked about that in multiple episodes early in our earlier podcast of what we kind of anticipated for him throughout the year based on last year, and we haven't seen it. We've seen consistency, which we expect from him as a driver and his experience. So we'll kind of see how he comes out on Father's Day and performs.
Just as a little fun little thing, if you could have found odds somewhere that after 16 races, both Hamlin and Harvick would not have a win, what do you think the odds would have been for that bet?
Oh, man,
like
I don't know.
Plus 10,000, like 100 to 1 at least, right?
Because both of those guys were favorites going in, and they were dominant last year. You have to remember how many wins those guys had.
9 for Harvick, 7 for Hamlin.
Together, that's 16. That's almost half the schedule that those two were able to dominate last year, and this year we haven't seen it at all. So we have to start seeing. We talked about Hamlin being potentially kind of in a position this week to step up. We need to see it from Harvick too.
And plus, you mentioned earlier, Childress is finally getting to set the car up the way he wants right out of the gate. What have you been doing for 16 races? I thought you were the crew chief. What is happening? Is there something going on within that team, do you think? I mean, that seems, when you told me that, I was very surprised to hear a crew chief say that. It's like either you're not in complete control or you passed off control. Like what? I was very surprised to hear that, especially after 16 races.
Well, we talked about it again in some of our earlier episodes. How much are teams going to be focused on this year versus next year with the next gen car? How much money is going to be spent for performance? And now we're seeing how far back Stewart-Haas is in the mix, and it's kind of embarrassing. So I don't know if they decided to all right, guys, we're going to give you a little bit
strong finish
to be able to wrap this up, make a strong push. Most of these guys are out of contention for getting in on points, so they're going to have to take opportunities like this to be able to get in. So is Eric Almirola going to be in the mix? Is Chase Briscoe, who had speed today, going to be in the mix? Is Cole Custer, who we didn't really talk about at all because he really hasn't been in the conversation much at all.
Yeah, not great in the practice time at all. I mean, what is he's like 27th. So he's not great. They're going to need something special to happen for them to make it in the playoffs. I think that they're out. I still feel like if Briscoe's going to get in, it might happen at the Indy road course. He was really strong there in Xfinity. If they can give him a fast enough car, I think he's got the talent to at least be up there. That's the only way that team gets in. Amarola, having the 12th best practice time, that's encouraging. I do not see him outperforming some of these other guys. Again, something crazy could happen. I got to think that they're looking at Daytona as their race to get in. That's their last push. I got to think that as an organization, most of the focus has to be on the 4 team because that's really the only option they have this year. They're too far out in points. The likelihood that they get a win with the performance they've had is so small. I would think that at this point it's all about Harvick and then the next gen car.
Speaking of the next gen car, we've got a lot of news to talk about in regards to that. We found out this week that Colleague Racing will be fielding 2 full-time cars. They were able to acquire 2 charters from Spire, so we'll have that development, which is cool because I'm a fan of what Colleague's doing. I've been watching them throughout the years, and they seem to be really engaged with the fans. They've got drivers that really get it, and they're strong. So this is cool. There's a lot of stuff that's starting to kind of fall into place as far as the next gen car and the 2022 season. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they did announce that Justin Haley will be their full-time driver. The other car, they will have other drivers. We know Allmendinger for sure will be in it. They didn't say how many races. You got to think probably a decent amount of the road courses.
Well, they have Kaz Gralla that's
well,
been
that's
in the
what
mix
I was
too.
just about to say. Even though no one else is really talking about it, I got to think that he's going to get thrown into the mix. Maybe a couple road courses. He's not done so bad at some of the ovals. I got to think that he gets at least a few shots, which would be awesome for him. Maybe that could lead to a well, you know what? Maybe he's going to end up in the 11 in the Xfinity ride if Justin Haley's going full time in the Cup. So maybe that's going to be their plan, with possibly a few Cup races. It's exciting to see the buzz going into this new car because that's really what NASCAR needs to kind of energize itself. The last few years have been kind of flat overall. I think most fans who've been around for a while kind of know that. The numbers kind of show that as far as viewers. Been kind of upticking this season some, but they need to build hype around this next season, and teams coming in like Colleague that are not just going to be backmarker teams. They're not going to settle for getting 30th overall. They're going to be doing what they can. Even in the few races they've entered, what was it? Allmendinger finished, 6th at Coda or something like that? I think Gralla he was in the 500?
I believe so.
I remember they had a good run there.
Yeah, it was top 5.
Yeah. They're going to be putting their best foot forward. I would expect a performance similar to what we've seen so far from like a Trackhouse with Daniel Suarez. I think they may even come in and do better than what we've seen thus far with 2311 racing. I expect Colleague to be not a serious contender. I know they're going to probably need a few years, but it seems like the way NASCAR's positioning themselves with this car is supposed to be a little bit more even. Maybe we will see teams like Colleague fighting for top 10s more consistently than what we have seen from other teams in this particular generation car.
Yeah, there's still a lot to play out throughout the summer months. The rumor mill is full of hot topics. 23XI seems to be wanting to field a second car. There's rumors of Kurt Busch joining that mix, and there's still a lot of dominoes to officially left to fall, so it's going to be fun to see how that kind of plays out. But you talked about the fan experience a little bit. You had the full-on fan experience with the All-Star race this past weekend. I haven't really got a chance to talk to you too much in regards to that. We've been so busy trying to get schedules aligned to get this done and talk about what we were getting into with Nashville. What was the NASCAR All-Star experience like there in person? Because when we were watching from home, there was a lot of inverts and things, and I know you even texted me a couple times saying, "Hey, who looks strong and what's going on?" Kind of.
Well, first thing I can tell you is it was ridiculously hot. That was first and foremost.
But you're a Texan, you understand that.
Yeah, you understand it, but you still don't necessarily get used to it. It was hot, very hot, late in the afternoon. Thankfully, the race did go on later. It even went long enough that the sun went down. So once we were in our seats, it wasn't so bad, especially once the cars were driving by. That did help with some airflow, made it a little bit more comfortable. But
vortex?
Yeah, the vortex. So that helped. The biggest issue I had is, I didn't have one of the race scanners. I will be making that purchase. For whatever reason, the last two races I've been to, COTA and the Texas All-Star race, the NASCAR app I could never get it to work. So I was out of the loop for most of the race. It's one of the reasons why I was texting you. Kind of hard to keep up with it. It sounds like it was a little difficult for even fans watching at home. And even the race teams, most of them didn't really know. They're just like, okay, just wherever NASCAR tells you to go, that's where you go. So I think they could have done that a little bit better. They could have cleaned that up. I thought the racing overall, when they were actually going, was fun. Obviously Larson ended up winning the All-Star race. He was looking good, but Byron was one of the strongest cars most of the day. There was some exciting... There was some good racing. There's some good side-by-side. There was some good passes. We saw Brad make a great three-wide pass towards the end of the race. So for a Texas race, I thought this is a pretty good experience. The green flag runs, the stages, they were just long enough where you couldn't completely get settled in and just tick off laps. You didn't see a bunch of separation. The cars stayed close. So I thought overall the length was good. It was about as good as you're probably going to get with this car, with this particular racing surface at Texas. So overall, I would probably give the racing experience a solid A for NASCAR. Where NASCAR really failed the fans was because it was so hot, they did not have enough staff there to adequately supply drinks and food to the fans. At one point, some of the people I was with, I was looking for him, texted him. He had been in line already for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and he was only halfway around, and we still waited another 25, 30 minutes just to get some drinks. There was just one girl working that particular station. Each station basically had one person working. And the crowd was a pretty large crowd. I don't know how it looked on TV, but there was a lot of people there. So that was a really big fail. I know there was a lot of people upset after the race. Normally I try to keep things pretty positive when it comes to NASCAR because it's so easy for fans to complain about every little thing. But that was definitely a very big negative in my eyes. You're not going to let the fans bring in coolers, so they can't keep their drinks cold, and you're not going to have enough help on hand to supply your fans on a very, very hot afternoon. That was I give NASCAR an F in that regard.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of folks standing up to kind of voice their opinion on where they stand with it. NASCAR overall it's an organization that really does do a decent job of listening to its fans. So I would imagine that they are really strongly listening and considering what they can do to appease them. But things can't happen on a dime, especially in the environment we've been in. Some things take a little bit of time to change.
And apparently that's the reason why they're not allowing the coolers, is they don't want the people going through the coolers, searching it with all the COVID and stuff like that. But the way the fans are, I mean, it was at this point, at this stage where we're at, I thought they got to make a different policy. Again, if you have to avoid the coolers in the stands, that's one thing, but you got to adequately be able to supply the fans with cold drinks, food, where they don't have to stand and miss a good portion of the race. If you're in a line for an hour, you're easily going to miss a stage, maybe two. I missed the entire driver intros, which I was looking forward to just because I needed some water to cool off. I mean, like I said, it was hot. So that's definitely something that I hope, like you said, they are good at listening to their fans. I hope that they take that into consideration because they can't have that, especially during the summer. So that's something they need to work on. But other than that, I did really enjoy the All-Star race. It was fun to go to. It was unexpected for me. Kind of lucked into it. But I'm definitely glad that I went because, hey, it's another race in my home state. So
yeah, we talked about it a lot. Having two races here in Texas has been a fun opportunity, and hoping to see more. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the schedule plays out. You mentioned Larson won the All-Star race. He's had a great impact on the season so far, and we expect it throughout. So anything else that you want to talk about before we wrap this one up?
I just, it's a thing that's frustrating. I guess the most frustrating right now is just, we can't do our normal episodes the way we like with the qualifying. But despite that, I'm excited for this Nashville race. I don't know how exciting, entertaining it's going to be based on what we've seen from the trucks earlier. But it seems like that city is really excited to have it back. So I expect a pretty good turnout tomorrow. And it'll be interesting to see. Maybe this will be, like you said, kind of a wild card race. Maybe a guy who hasn't won yet gets the win. We really don't know. But I do feel like the most likely scenario, at least at this point, is Hendrick's going to be strong. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's about all I got for this one.
Well, we'll have more to be able to provide you in our race guide, and like we've talked about throughout the episode, that will be available in the description below, as well as our Twitter and our social medias. We're there on Instagram as well, but those links are down there, as well as those of you that prefer to listen on the podcast. Check out our Buzzsprout. We've got multiple platforms that we're available on, and we've seen a real big uptick in our podcast downloads, which we really, truly appreciate. So if you like the content you're listening to or watching, please subscribe and comment if you don't see something or you just want to engage with us. We love the interaction, the opportunity to engage with you. So on any of the platforms, please be able to, or please comment, and we'll would love to have that further engagement. But I think that's about all we've got for this episode, and we're excited to see find out some of these unknowns that are going to play out here at Nashville. But for the DK Garage, I'm Joe, and that's Jeremy, and we'll see you next time.